Hello, and welcome to Unleash Monday, where we talk about the brain, especially the gifted brain, and how does it affect our thinking and experience of the world differently. There are a lot of stereotypes and stigma around giftedness, and I'm here to challenge those. I'm here to raise awareness and to have a conversation around this topic of what does it mean to be a gifted adult. Common experience among gifted folks is that they feel out of place. They don't quite fit in. They are too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, too overexcitable, and too deep thinkers about the world and about themselves. If you have been called too much of about anything, then this show is for you. My name is Nadia. I'm too loud, too colorful, too bubbly, too bossy, and love to talk too much. So welcome to my world, and I'm so happy you're here. Hi, and welcome everybody. I'm happy you're here, and I hope I can inspire you with a little bit of energy and positivity for the start of the week and to give you some inputs and some new insights into the topic of gifted adults and also gifted children. So let's just get right started by introducing you to today's guest. Her name is Femke Hovinga, and she was introduced to me by Julie Skolnick. Julie Skolnick was here 2 episodes ago. She talked with me how she found it with Understanding Comes Calm and also started the conference series, Let's Talk to E. So Julie does amazing things for gifted and twice exceptional human beings. And so she told me I should reach out to Femke, and Femke was so generous to give me her time and come onto this podcast and share what she's doing. And Femke has also found a niche inside this very niche topic. So she's going to talk more, obviously, in the interview. So I don't want to say too much because she's going to start from the beginning and shares how she discovered her own giftedness already as a child and how she still struggled growing up and how she thought she's going to want to improve children's lives when she's an adult and helping children like herself. And so that's what she's doing now. But she's also helping adults and she does so many things. But I think it's best to just let her speak and share her story. And so let's just dive right into this amazing interview. So without further ado, here is Femke Hovinga. Welcome, Femke. I'm super excited you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you.
It's so beautiful, this whole community of people working in this gifted space. And Julie actually introduced us and said, you need to check out my friend Femke. She has such an incredible story and is doing incredible work. And so why don't we start? Do you want to share how you got to where you are now? And I think it's such an incredible insight and story. Maybe we start from your childhood?
Sure, let's start there because actually that is what triggered me and what got me to this point. So I grew up in Utrecht, which is a city in the center of the Netherlands. And there was a lot to do. There were many shops around the place where I grew up and always tourists walking around. So my mom and we always went out together to explore the city and make new friends. And I was a very curious young kid walking around and enjoying the things I was doing. And when I was 2 years old, I started to read out the things I saw to my mom. Now, my mom is a child psychologist. So she went well, that's peculiar, but okay, as long as the kid is happy, that's fine with me. So she just went on and did her thing. And I was happy. I was learning. I was curious and just enjoying myself. Until at age 4, I went to school. I was really looking forward to going to school because I thought, I'm going to meet new friends and I'm going to find people who are my peers and I'm going to do projects and learn new things. And I was all excited. But of course, when you start kindergarten, it's not that easy for a gifted child because most things you'll probably know at the point you get started. So I was interested in the solar system, whereas other kids were throwing dolls at each other and doing things that normal kids do at age 4. So I was kind of disappointed and I figured, there must be something wrong with me. I was desperately striving to fit in And I was really longing to be part of a group with kids like me, but I didn't know what was going on. So I started to disengage really early on in my school career. I wasn't making the potential true for the things I was learning in school. So I wasn't really performing well. I was underachieving when I was very young, but also I was bullied by children in my class because I was different. And of course, being different as a kid is always a bit difficult in a group. So I figured when I was about 6 years old that I should do something for children who were just like me. Now, of course, as a 6-year-old, I couldn't do a lot. Fortunately for me, here in the Netherlands, there were a few places where we could go to meet other gifted kids. But of course, not like today. I'm 32. So when I was 4 years old, the world looked a bit different.
May I ask, so you were identified as gifted then very early on?
Yes, because my mother, of course, being a child psychologist, she didn't really know what to look for in gifted per se, because she had never worked with gifted children. But she did know that it was not normal what I was doing, not age appropriate, I should say. So she knew there was something going on. And in school, they said, there's something wrong with Femke. She's doing weird things. She's not acting like a child her age. There must be something wrong. There must be a diagnosis of some kind. And giftedness was not a very common topic at the time. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I took my first IQ test. And then, well, we knew what was wrong, to put it like that. And that was just that I was gifted and so a bit different. So I promised myself that when I was a grown-up, I would do something for the children who were struggling then. And that's what I ended up doing, although I took a bit of a side road to get here.
So when you were 6 years old, you then got into a special gifted school, or what happened at 6 years?
Well, there were no special gifted schools, actually. There were programs for gifted children, so like the pull-out programs where you go once or twice a week. But because I was not the typical gifted child, I was not performing well. I was not, eager to learn according to all the school subjects we had. So I was not allowed into the pull-out program. On the other hand, they tested me, not with an IQ test, but with a type of test that sort of looked into how much of the primary school education you already knew. And when I was in what we call here groep 3, so the third group, which is I don't know. I cannot translate it to all the school systems of people who are listening probably, but I was 6 years old and they tested me and they said, oh, you can go to high school straight away. Of course, you don't want to go to high school when you're 6 years old, but there wasn't a whole lot for me to learn, which was, of course, a struggle for also the teachers, for the people around me. I was very unhappy because of, not having peers around me, but also not having the right challenges. So fortunately, I had many challenges at home and with other gifted children, but I was not happy in my day-to-day environment.
And so then you grew up and now doing all what you do for the gifted. Do you want to share what you do? And I think it's also very specialized within the gifted community.
Yes. That's right. So actually, I didn't immediately go to work with gifted people after my high school. I really struggled to get a diploma. And once I did, I thought, I'll go to journalism school because I really enjoyed writing and I'd been working in radio for a while. So I thought, why not? It will be a fun experience. And it sure was. And I started working in journalism, both in the Netherlands and abroad. And then figured, well, this is not really what I want to do. It's fun, but not until I'm like 70 years old. So I started to look for what else to do. And I had always enjoyed politics and working with companies, strategizing and making plans. So I figured I should do a master in business administration, which I started doing. And then when I finished, which I really enjoyed, by the way, and it was also a challenge because I had never really learned how to study. So I really struggled with how to get through university. But once I got my diploma, I was really proud of myself. I figured, I still haven't done anything with gifted people. And I think I'm kind of a grown-up right now, so maybe I should start doing something with it. And I did a course here, a post-university course, which is called the Talent Coach. So it's a 2-year program where people who are not from the educational world and not from the psychology world can learn how to be a coach or counselor for gifted, mostly children. So I started doing that. And once I wrapped up, I found that there is very little information about the 145 plus IQ. In fact, most European tests only test until the 145 plus. And you never know whether it's 146 or 210. I mean, it's more likely it's 146, but still, 210 could well be because we don't know what it is. So I started to really look into this group of the 145 plus, which in Dutch we call hyper gifted, because we couldn't really define them above that level yet. And I found there's very little information, but also very little places for them to go. And it's about 1 in 1,000 people. So there are very few of them. You're not going to find them by just going out and playing with other kids, or perhaps not even in your gifted classroom, because they're just very, very hard to find. So I figured we should do something for that group. And we started peer programs and coaching for that group. And well, it's over the years, so we're doing many different things for this specific group in the Netherlands and Belgium right now, varying from psychologists who work on trauma in hyper-gifted adults to coaching gifted children, helping schools, developing programs for the 145 plus group. So it's a super diverse thing we do, but all for this like little group out of a little group, the 1 in 1,000 group. Yep.
I have a question. So if you say gifted and trauma, this comes up a lot. And I guess
Yes.
the higher gifted you are, this trauma also is prominent.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a lot people say, well, if you're so smart, you're going to figure it out. You don't need support. You're smart enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so why does the group 145 plus need special attention, and why is there a grade? And can you say a little bit about trauma? There's so many questions in one. Sorry.
I know. Well, I still have a lot of questions too, because of, the group is so small that it's very hard to find good research. In fact, there is very little good research about the group. So many things I will state are mostly from experience, and unfortunately less from research we already have. So what we see in our practice is that the 145 plus people tend to be very sensitive, all in their own way and with their own character, of course, but also they have never really had a good amount of developmental peers. So they had age peers, they had people around them with similar IQs, perhaps, and probably they had people in their family with similar IQs. But outside their family, it was likely to be very hard for them to connect to others. Now, everybody needs to mirror, as we say it, with other people in order to develop themselves, to learn what is normal, what to do in certain situations. And when you're the outsider in a group, like I was, but also like the clients we have here typically are, then you cannot really mirror yourself with others because other people think differently. Other people do things differently. And it makes a very hard way to develop yourself if there's nobody around you to compare yourself with in a developmental way. So we say that there are fewer ways of getting trauma, to put it like that. It sounds like you're going to shop. Of course, it's not the case, but there are the big T traumas, which are events that are traumatic. For instance, you get in a car accident or you are abused or something like that. That is an event that we call a big T trauma. But there's also a little T trauma. And those are events like a teacher telling you, yeah, you should, behave normally. Please, I mean, we have a whole class here, everybody behaves, and you're, the odd one out again. Stop asking all these hard questions. Why are you always needing to be learning more? I mean, can't you just be satisfied with whatever you're doing? And if you hear that over and over, and if you are bullied, if you stand out all the time, that's what we call little T trauma. And being different, very different than the general population, I think it's easier to gather all these little T traumas. So I think that's what's happening for people who come here with feelings of trauma and are asking for therapy. Now, it's super important to be seen for who you are. Of course, that goes for everybody, But in a typical IQ range, the biggest group, of course, is IQ 85 to IQ 115. So in that group, it's relatively easy to find peers. But the higher you go, the harder it is to really be seen in your full potential and your full own character. So what these people really need is just to be seen. And of course, sometimes they need a therapy session or maybe more, or coaching. Of course, they're like anybody, they can go through certain events. But if you're just not recognized for a long time, that in itself can be a really hard experience.
Wow. Yeah. And so now you already touched a little bit of what you're doing. So you do various different things, right? So
Yes.
where should we start?
Yeah, I find that hard too. But I think that many people, among them yourself also, will recognize that if you have different interests and different ambitions, that you may have a resume that looks like you're a bit crazy.
Yes,
I
I
recognize
do.
that. Yeah, I know you do too. And I think people who are listening to us right now may, emphasize with that too. So yeah, I do quite diverse things. So this is Talentissimo, which is the 145 plus platform here. Now also I work with Scalic, which is a company where we develop IQ tests for probably gifted people because they typically don't really fit into the regular IQ test. And there is InterIQ, which is a company that does recruitment specifically for gifted employees. So
Okay, there's a recruiting company
there is, yes.
for gifted people. So everybody listening out here, if you're looking for a job, there's recruitment.
There is, yeah. Unfortunately for now, only in the Netherlands, but I hope that eventually, well, actually, I hope it's not necessary anymore in a little bit of time.
Yeah. So, and you talked about developing this IQ test for,
Yes.
at the moment, it's currently only for children from 5 to 10 years old,
Yes,
isn't it?
that's right.
And what I gathered, so your website is only in Dutch currently, but Google Translate on the website is amazing. So I read it in English. So I saw that you developed this IQ test for children 5 to 10 to really see within the giftedness spectrum of where they actually go. As you said, usually it's just, oh, you're gifted. And if you're over 145 plus, it's just, well, you're highly gifted.
Super gifted.
Super gifted. But it is important to know where you are on the scale, right? That's what you're advocating for and saying, well, the higher you go, the different your needs are, and the less you say the chances to find peers. And so you're really developing this tool to precisely telling where the kids are.
Yes, that is one of the reasons, because, well, yesterday actually I had a conversation with a school here, and they asked me like, hey, is it actually relevant to know for a child anyway, to realize where you are on the IQ spectrum? Whether it's 145 plus or 180, does it really matter? And it depends how you look at it, I guess, both for children and adults. Because will it help you to get a better understanding of why, for instance, you still don't feel at home with a group of Mensa members? Or will it help you to adapt your life to something? And now for children, of course, there are gifted programs here, as there will be in other countries, I hope, where people are listening in from. But there are no programs here for the 145 plus children. They go in the program with the 130-ish children, which of course makes sense because there are very few 145 plus kids. But it's really hard to fit them in with that group, because imagine there's a 180 IQ kid in a 130 IQ class, then you have a similar difference to a normally intelligent person and a gifted person. A highly gifted person, in fact. So that's a pretty big difference to have in one classroom. And so does it matter practically? Probably not, because they're not going to be able, as hard as they're trying and as much as they want to, they're not going to be able to differentiate towards a 180 IQ child. It is, in fact, so that a 180 IQ 9-year-old will probably have the cognitive capacity of a person in his 20s. But of course, it's also just a child. I mean, it's a 9-year-old, for instance, and a 9-year-old may like to go out and play, climb trees, has unicorn plush toys. Does the 9-year-old stuff they can typically engage in. So it's really hard to find a way to deal with the asynchrony in daily practice. And in a lesser extent, that also goes for adults, because you're always your own personality as well. It's not just a walking IQ number. In fact, I don't really care about the IQ. I just want to know how we can see that person, how we can really work with somebody, whether it's a child or an adult, and what we can do for them. And one of the important things in that process is to be seen. So it starts with recognizing somebody, and it's easier to do that if you truly and intrinsically understand somebody. And that's why it's, I guess, easier for us to emphasize with the 145 plus people than it is for a typical person working in education or otherwise.
If now these kids come and get an assessment, and we already talked about twice exceptionality before. So if a kid comes and has something else going on, a learning difficulty, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, is that something this test takes into account?
Yes, definitely. And one of the reasons, it's not only that we wanted to measure above 145. I mean, that was one of the goals because we were curious and we thought it would be helpful. But the other reasons were that the IQ tests that are out there right now are just not made for gifted children. They start too easy. The questions are oftentimes, you can find multiple answers that may be right. So it's really hard to find the right answer. So for instance, we had an IQ test here, not ours, with a tree that was just a pencil drawing. Tree goes up and to the roof and two little apples in front of the tree. And the question was, how many apples are there in this tree? Now you should know that the girl who was sitting there, she was a 5-year-old and she was counting until, well, I don't even know where, in the hundreds. And she was doing a little multiplications and adding and, all those things she was doing. And so it shouldn't be hard for her to count like 1, 2. So the test administrator goes, hey, the time's running out. I should write down your answer. Can you please tell me? So the kid goes, yeah. And the administrator got just really frustrated because, what's going on? So the kid goes, 4. 4? Okay. And as you may know, at an IQ test, you have to stop assessing a child at the point where he or she has made a certain number of mistakes in a row. And that was this point, and the tester goes, hey, what went on there? Because you're very well able to count. So 1, 2, shouldn't be that hard, should it? And so goes the child, an apple tree never has apples on just one side of the tree. There are usually apples, at both sides and the back of the tree from here. And I feared, probably the test makers thought it would be easiest if you just figured there was a certain way of symmetry. So 2 apples in front and 2 at the back. So that's how I got to 4. In other words, they are asking something. And the question was just not suitable for the child because her answer went way beyond the actual question. And if you asked her to count to 2, which was in fact a question, she would have done that or not, depending on how stubborn she was at the moment. But I mean, she could. And that's what you wanted to measure. So we figured that there should be a way to better suit the needs of gifted children, but also twice exceptional children, as you mentioned. So what we saw in research is that autistic children who are very intelligent or even gifted typically have lower scores on IQ tests than non-autistic gifted children or intelligent children. So we figured we should do something to battle that. So we researched what we could do to make that better. And well, I won't talk about it for 3 hours because I will if you won't stop me. But it turns out that we were able to make a test that does really see their potential. So they scored a bit higher in comparison to their earlier reports on our test. So we're very happy with those type of results. And same goes for pretty much anything else because we took out time pressure. Because we figure it measures something. but it only measures how you deal with time pressure. So if you put me somewhere with a stopwatch and you go, hey, Femke, you have 1 minute to solve this super complex puzzle, I'll like completely stress out and block myself like, no.
I'm the same.
And my colleague, for instance, she's super competitive. And if you tell her, hey, you have 1 minute, she'll go like, yes, I can do it in 30 seconds. So, you measure something, but you don't measure your intelligence. So we took that out, and that helps for children with test anxiety. Now you have other things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, and also color blindness, for instance. So without boring you with all the details, we figured out from earlier research from other researchers what they learned about these disorders and what we could do to see them and to really measure their potential. So I like to say we want to measure the motor potential of the car and not how fast it's going on the highway, because you don't know what the potential is. You only see how fast the car drives. And of course, if you have exceptional potential, we want to really see it. And the fact that children may have a DSM disorder, as we put it, we don't really like the labels anyway, but let's say they have one of those, shouldn't make the difference in how you can measure what their potential is. So we really tried, and of course, we make mistakes too. I hope they're not big ones, because we're just wrapping up the whole norming process. But for as far as we can see now, and the data supports that we are able to measure very well in twice exceptional children as well.
Amazing. But then you leave out their disadvantage so that they can really show what they're capable in terms of their brain power, but the test itself will not detect if somebody has ADHD or is on the autism spectrum. That's another assessment then, right? So that
it is another assessment, but it would be interesting. We haven't done so yet, but it would be interesting to see whether there is a certain pattern, because we do know that there are in our norming group, of course, children with specific labels, to put it like that. So we had children with ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, and many, many other things, anxiety disorders, dyslexia, dyscalculia, etc., etc. So we do know what they've done on our IQ test. So perhaps we can analyze and connect the dots on whether there is, we cannot diagnose anything like that with just an IQ test. Perhaps there are some attention points that we can figure out, but we haven't looked at it yet.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And currently it's targeted for children 5 to 10. But what happens if an adult takes this, or are you developing a different test for the adult age range?
Well, it's a pretty fun question, actually, because the average adult could be measured with this test. Now, of course, we didn't norm the test for that group, so we cannot use it like that, but it would be possible. In fact, when parents pick up their child after the test is administered, we always have them take a few of the items we have in the books, because it's a lot of fun to see them struggle as well for the children. Because, in fact, the last few items in the books are made for adults with a very high IQ.
Okay.
So it's not even so that parents can per se do all of them. And typically they are above average as well. So even very smart people can struggle sometimes with these items. We are going to start a new project because we don't want to get bored, of course. And that will be a project in which we aim to make an IQ test for children from 11 until, some age in adulthood. And we'll have to see what age that will be, but that we can hopefully measure most of adults as well, also above 145. But you can imagine it's going to be more and more difficult to make the right items, because if you want to measure let's say 25-year-old with a 180 IQ, you're going to make really, really, really difficult items. So yeah, that's going to be a new challenge for us.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Can't wait to hear more from that. And I think there's also a symposium coming up in this field. Do you want to promote it here?
Sure. And people from, wherever are really welcome. You should just know that the introduction of the symposium is probably going to be in Dutch, unless, of course, we have 500 people from other countries joining us now. Perhaps we should do another one completely in English. We're going to launch the test for children because we've been working on it for about 3 years. And about 800 children took the test. And we had 100 people from the Netherlands and Belgium who helped administering it. So we're longing to celebrate. And of course, we wanted to do that offline. But during COVID-19 times, we took the second best, and that will be a Zoom webinar. So we're going to be there celebrating, but also, of course, sharing a lot of information about the test. So we'll have 2 speakers, Dr. Russell Warren, who is the author of the book In the Know, and he's debunking myths about intelligence, which is going to be a lot of fun. He's a really good author, researcher, and also speaker. And we have Dr. Paul Belgian, who is one of the authors of the book about myths and double diagnosis in gifted children and adults. So we're very excited to have those 2. And we're going to be sharing a lot about the test, but for now it's going to be in Dutch. So we're going to see whether we're going to organize something else in English, because of course we have the ambition to be available to gifted people around the world eventually.
Yeah. Well, but you're also currently doing a PhD, because otherwise it will be boring for you.
Yeah, I would be so bored now.
Oh, you have so many things going on. And this is also something I have been thinking about. I was like, wow, getting into this topic of giftedness, and I work in a research kind of environment. I'm like, well, there must be a few of us that are in this gifted range, and some of them are probably in the hyper category. Tell us about your PhD thesis.
So the last company I talked about earlier, underachieving, is for gifted people who are looking for work. And I found that people who are looking for work and are gifted typically have weird resumes. Like I mentioned, I have one of those in the beginning. And I remember that when I got out of business school, I was thinking to work for a consultancy firm. And I started applying, and one of my friends said, hey, I work at this one company, and the HR lady, she would be happy to have you over for a coffee. So I went there, took my resume, which of course was a bit funny already at the time. And then I sat down and said, hey, here's my resume, and I look forward to chatting with you today. And she looked at my resume and, sort of goes like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so what's going on here? And she said, oh, I see on your resume that you took like only the middle level of high school. And you should know, if you only take the middle level of high school and not the highest level, we have a differentiation here in the Netherlands, then you're just never going to make it. And I know you got your master's of science, but, just proves that, you can be an assistant to one of our consultants. You can make the PowerPoints.
And I have to laugh here.
Yeah. Well, now I'm laughing about it too, but I was just flabbergasted. I went like, whoa, you don't know me. And of course, I'm not going to say that I was the very best person for that position. In fact, right now, I'm pretty happy she declined. But the fact is that people are still looking at other people as though they're just a walking resume when they start applying. And we thought there are many gifted people who dropped out. The NAGC, National Association for Gifted Children in the United States, actually estimates that about 25% of all children who are in the gifted range don't finish education. And here in the Netherlands, there was an educated guess by a number of researchers who work with gifted people that about 33% of gifted people does not work in a place where they can show their potential. Another 33% is in a place where they, they're okay. They're getting through their days. They're paying for their mortgage. And only about a third of gifted people are actually thriving in their work. And of course, not every day is fun at work, but that's the same for everybody. But they're in the right place. So that's a very low number. And I got really worried for our society, not just here in the Netherlands, of course, but worldwide. I mean, if we don't treat our biggest talents in a way that they can start to excel, then we're not going to find the right vaccine for COVID-19. We're not going to be able to battle cancer. We're not going to be able to solve all the environmental problems. We're not going to be able to finally find world peace. I mean, there are many big questions here in the world. And if we don't see people for their talents and only see them for their education and their resumes, then we're not going to make it through eventually. So I figured, we should do something for those gifted adults. And that's why we started InterIQ. And we also found that among companies who are not already acquainted with gifted people, it's often seen as a disability. So that disability is, well, not what we see it to be. They treat it as though it is autism spectrum disorder, which is also, in my eyes, by the way, not really a disability anyway. But, they treat it as though there are a different group of people with a label. And there's many stigmas around them still. Like you mentioned in the beginning of our talk, you're gifted, so you should be able to do everything. You're gifted, so you're probably a nerd with little social skills. All those kind of things are still very much alive in the HR groups within companies. Of course, not all companies, but in general, we found that there are still many people who unfortunately think that way. So I thought we should do more to combine the fields of work and giftedness. And with my background in business administration, I thought, perhaps I can tie the two together. So I went back to my former university and said, hey, I specialized in giftedness now. Can we perhaps do something to research gifted at work? And fortunately, they were very enthusiastic. And I said, hey, there is indeed very little we know about that. So I'm researching right now how gifted people on the work floor can do job crafting for their own jobs. So how they can make their job more interesting, but also how gifted workers are perceived by their managers and by their work peers or co-workers, depending on how you call them, a peer. I'm only at the starting point. I just wrapped up my research proposal, which was gladly accepted. So I'm really happy to move on from here. And I'm starting with a literature study, which is actually pretty funny because there's very little literature about this topic. But that can also be something we can point out, of course, and make recommendations to both researchers and the practical side of things, so the HR development side. So I'm hoping to connect those two worlds together and eventually, but of course, you said you do so many things, but of course I'm not alone. Fortunately, there are people both in the teams I work with, but also our friends in the gifted field in the Netherlands and abroad who are also doing similar things. So I'm only a small part of a really big puzzle, but I try to make a little impact and solve some riddles there. So that's what I'm hoping to do.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And I wish I could get access to your literature review library at some point.
I'll share a bit with you. Don't worry.
That's amazing. And before we wrap up here, because I could talk for hours with you.
Yeah, me too.
Where can people find you?
So if people want to reach out, I think it's easiest to, what's easiest way because of all these initiatives? Easiest to spell is Femke at interiq.nl. So Femke is Femke and then at interiq.
I will put everything in the show notes so people can just go in the links and then click.
Excellent.
You can send me all the links and I put them. So
okay, well, that's great.
And you have the Talentissimo website, right?
Yes.
And how do you pronounce it?
We say Scalig, but it really depends on from what language background you come, I guess. So
yeah, I'm going to put everything in the show notes so the listener can go and click. So I have one more last question for you. Sure. What would you like people to know? Is there anything you wish people would know, something you want to share, or something you wish you knew earlier?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, for me as an adult now, I really struggled because I felt so different, even though pretty early on I knew what was going on, to put it like that. So what I like to tell people is to be the person they needed as a kid. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. And for people who are in a place where they're struggling now is to know that there are people like you And perhaps they are not easy to find, which I know. And I can imagine if you're struggling, especially in a country where it's not widely accepted to be different, then I understand your struggle and I hear you. So please do reach out. I mean, I don't know people everywhere. Reach out to me or somebody else and find people who are your equals, because both in practice, but also in theory, we see that finding your peers is one of the most important factors in being happy and finding fulfillment in your life. So please do that and yeah, be there for yourself and for others who struggle to find their peers.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think even though there's COVID and we're all stuck at home, I think now with the internet and then all the platforms, social media, I hope there is spaces to connect. And so with my podcast, I'm trying to pull people a little bit in one space.
Yeah, well, that's great. I really, really appreciate your initiative for your podcast. And
thank you.
I'll share the word.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to say thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm sure we're going to stay in contact. And thank you so much, Femke.
Thank you so much, Nadja, for having me here, and best of luck to you with your wonderful podcast. And I'm going to listen to your other episodes. I look forward to it. So thanks, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, wasn't this amazing? I hope you enjoyed these conversations as much as I did. And I'm just so astounded by all these amazing people I'm getting access to. And by going on this journey, how I get introduced little by little to more amazing human beings who are working in the sphere of giftedness and twice exceptionality, and how I'm getting embraced and people are so open and willing to help and willing to share. And I'm really flabbergasted, is that the right word? And also by joining the G-Word partnership, I met a lot of new amazing human beings. And it's funny to see that the ones I already met, they're also all in this partnership. So that has been really amazing. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that contributed with sharing their story, their work, and also by everybody that has reached out to me, congratulating me on the podcast, and people that reach out to me saying that my stories and the interviews that I'm providing really makes a difference in their lives and how they can now also accept or go on this path of their own giftedness and finding this community. And so I'm just keep doing what I'm doing. I'm giving you every second week a new amazing interview with somebody either working in this field or is gifted or twice exceptional. And I think over time, we will really have a very great library of knowledge and resources, and just so that people can relate. And I know there's a little bit out there already, but sometimes people need to hear it from a specific person. So that's why I'm here. And that's why I think I want to be the voice for somebody who might not be able to voice it themselves, and just to raise awareness and fight these stereotypes and just improve our quality of life for the people that are in this category, or if you know somebody or working in this field. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm so happy you're with me on this journey. I think we're having great things ahead of us, and I can't wait to share the next guest with you. And in the background, I'm working on building community. So just, sign up for the newsletter on my website, and you will be the first to hear if there's any announcements. Things are slower than I probably myself wish they were, but I do this on the side. I do have a day job and I do this in my free time. So that's why it takes a little bit longer, but I think we're going to do this slowly and steadily and in a high quality. So that's my goal. So I'm here in the long run. And I'm so happy you found this podcast. And if you love it, then please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and give me a few stars. You can even leave a written review if you scroll all the way to the bottom. And you can also share the episode with somebody that might want to hear this. And that will really mean a lot. You can find me at unleashmonday.com. That's the website. And from there, there's all the links to the provider of the podcast. And you can also see all the links to the social media. You can find me at Instagram at unleash.monday. So let's stay in contact and please reach out. I'm really, really happy to hear all your stories. And that's from me today for you. And I see you in 2 weeks. Bye.